So, good afternoon and welcome to Public Health Network Cymru's first webinar in 2021. My name is Christian Heathcote-Elliott and I am the Principal Public Health Practitioner for the Wider Determinants of Health Unit in Public Health Wales. Since last summer, we've run a series of COVID-19 related webinars focusing on the impacts of the pandemic at the individual, community and a national level. In today's webinar, we are looking at how, as we emerge out of the pandemic, communities and organisations across Wales can lead on the green recovery, which places the circular economy and climate and natural emergencies at its heart. And we know that the green economy will also be central to creating jobs and employment, and providing opportunities to the many who have lost their jobs as a result of the pandemic and the restrictions. I'm therefore delighted to welcome our speaker, Dr. Sarah Williams, who is Head of 2050 Vision and Corporate Strategy in Natural Resources Wales. Sarah is a social scientist by background and economist with an extensive experience in working on complex environmental issues in the public sector, consultancy and academia. After Sarah's presentation, there will be a chance for you to ask your questions. If you could use the meeting chat to type in your questions, but please remember that your questions will be seen by all our webinar attendees today. And just a few housekeeping points. If we could ask you to keep your microphone and camera turned off during the webinar, so there are no distractions for our presenters. This webinar is recorded and will be made available on the Public Health Network Cymru's website and on our YouTube channel after the session. Both English and Welsh subtitles are available. These can be switched on using the button at the top right of your screens, and this button has got 3 dots you'll see. If you experience any technical difficulties, please could you let us know in the meeting chat and we will do our best to assist you. So I'd now like to hand over to Sarah, who will be giving our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian, and I hope you can hear me clearly. I'm just going to share my slides. Okay then, so I'm Sarah Williams. As Christian said, I lead for NRW on the Head of 2050 Vision and Corporate Strategy. So today I'm just going to give you the background, start off by giving you some of the background to the Green Recovery Task and Finish Group, to take you through the priorities that emerged from submissions provided by a cross-section of people and organisations across Wales, and then focus on the next steps. So the Green Recovery, this work started sort of last May, June time, when Sir David Henshaw, the chair of NRW, received a letter from our Minister, Lesley Griffiths, asking him to lead a task and finish group to look at measures to accelerate the recovery from the pandemic, to ensure that the recovery accelerated Wales's transition to a low carbon economy and a more healthy and equal Wales. There were some specific actions asks in that request that we worked with environmental NGOs, and that there was a consolidated response to the Green Recovery, which really focused on developing practical and prioritised proposals. There's recognition that that ministers wanted things to happen, didn't expect to see sort of big policy or strategic policy initiatives. A request or desire, and this goes without saying now within Wales really, to focus on the ways of working in the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, and to really try and lock in, if you recall, in the spring of last year, the positive attitudes and behaviours which were starting to emerge about people's perception and valuation of nature and the natural environment. So that was the ask of the Minister to Sir David Henshaw. Sir David Henshaw was asked to convene a cross-section of representatives to sort of focus on the recovery, making sure that it was really framed in sort of the pursuit of social justice, but really focused on addressing the climate and nature emergency. So the task and finish group, it was the group feeds into and reports to the MIRA, so that's Lesley Griffiths. She runs a roundtable, which has a whole cross-section of organisations representing food, farming, marine, environmental sector organisations, the national parks. And this work has reported into there. So the chair of Natural Resources Wales, Sir David Henshaw, was very keen to make sure that we didn't duplicate and provide an additional burden to those individuals. So try to step back and draw in other voices into the conversation and into the work of the task and finish group. So to draw out in particular for you guys, the fact that we had Cathy Weatherup from the Chief Medical Office was involved, Vivian Sugar from the chair of the Bevan Foundation, and Peter Davis, the chair of the Welsh Council for Voluntary Action. So it's a very clear commitment to draw in other voices, to draw in those with a real perspective on social equity, who understand the root causes of poverty and health inequality across Wales. So that was the membership of the group. And so the group spent quite a bit of time in the early days, sort of really focusing on discussing and agreeing really what do we mean by a green recovery. And I think there's two chunks to this. There's very much a focus on the green aspect. So that's, recognizing the fundamental importance of reversing the decline in nature. So responding to the nature emergency, addressing the climate emergency, so decarbonisation, and increasing the resilience of society and nature to the impacts of climate change itself, and then tackling unsustainable patterns of production and consumption, so the concept of the circular economy. There was a commitment, a recognition that we needed to focus on all of these three elements, not to focus on one element in isolation, that we needed to take an integrated and holistic approach. But in looking at those three outcomes, it was really important not to forget the other half of the paragraph, the other half, i.e. the recovery. And so the recovery was very much seen to be the economic recovery. So making sure that investment in the reversing the decline in nature, addressing decarbonisation and looking at the circular economy, making sure that when we were looking at those things, that we were focusing on investment that can support job creation and new markets, and also skills. And also to focus on the social aspect. In last spring, we were very much beginning to see that COVID was having a disproportionate impact perhaps across Wales in particular places, in particular communities or particular groups, often those which were most vulnerable and have been hardest hit by some of the underlying inequalities and deprivation across Wales. So it's really tried to make sure that in addressing a green recovery, that we drive the benefits for jobs, new markets, and targeting that action really to some of the most deprived places across Wales. So the report sets out sort of the strategic objectives. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time dwelling on these today, but it's really sort of important to recognise that we were very focused on encouraging and facilitating collaborative working at the community, the sector, the regional and the all Wales scale. We were very keen to avoid top-down imposition of ideas or initiatives. So it's very much what has emerged from the people of Wales, the communities of Wales, the organisations across Wales. And it was really a recognition that we need to commit the energy and the resources really to make sure that those things that we've learned from the first phase of the COVID experience, and I think it's really important speaking about the recovery in January 2021, that we're not in a recovery phase, we are still very much in a response phase. But learning from that first phase of the COVID response, making sure that we draw out those lessons, and we start to identify, and we're starting to identify those things that we want to do more of, those things that we may need to stop, to enable us collectively across Wales to create the space to focus on the things that we feel collectively are important. So the approach that the Task and Finish group adopted was very, very committed, really, to making it simple, keeping it simple. They wanted to engage and involve as many different people and organisations as possible within what was a very short time frame. That we were focused on good ideas that involved developing existing initiatives or projects, so growing those, as well as initiating new ideas for testing as demonstrators. So the call for good ideas, which went out late July, was a very simple pro forma, some simple two sides of questions, really to allow people to describe their idea to support a green recovery across Wales, to allow people, we didn't pigeonhole people or pigeonhole the ideas into sort of set criteria. It was very much a blank canvas for individuals and groups to set out their ideas. And it's important to remember that this is not and was not a grant application process. So this was a simple call for good ideas. And so we had, by the end of August, early September, we'd received 180 submissions from across Wales, and 168 of those we have taken. We analysed all of them, of course, but we screened some out, and we came to 168 proposals, which we've talked about and described to some extent in our report. So the outcomes that we've seen, and I'm going to give you an overview, then I'm going to focus in a little bit more detail of those which I feel might have been more relevant and of interest to you in the audience today. So as you'd expect, there's a very strong focus on nature-based solutions. So these are action to improve protected sites, to restore peatland, to increase the area and the quality of our woodland and hedgerows, to improve the blue carbon in our marine environment, and to restore our rivers and wetlands. These actions under these 5 areas really very much at a multiple benefit. They're a no-brainer in many ways of addressing the nature emergency, but also having significant benefits for Wales's collective efforts to decarbonise and to build the resilience of our ecosystems to the threats of increasing temperatures. So the report sort of sets out how nature-based solutions need to be at the heart of the green recovery. We then have a series of more sector-based ideas, themes which have come through. These relate to food, sort of what you traditionally call our socioeconomic systems. So there's a focus on food, and this is growing food within our communities, looking at building the resilience of our local food networks, locally grown food, low input food growing. There's a focus on marine and the marine environment and improving building the resilience of the marine environment, but also the resilience of those communities along the marine margins as well. There's a very strong focus on reimagining our urban areas, and I'll talk about that in more detail in a moment. And again, a very strong focus on active travel and sustainable transport. There are a number of proposals about building the circular economy, and this theme ran through a number of the proposals in the food sector in particular. There's a focus on social housing and in particular retrofitting our social housing across Wales to support the deliver improvements in the quality of that housing, which also contributes to decarbonisation, but also is identifying a significant opportunity for skills and job creation. And then the final one in this one is around health and well-being. And then the third set of outcomes relate to the enablers. So in investing in nature-based solutions, investing in socioeconomic systems, those changes in those different sectors of our economy, we've drawn out, the significant number of opportunities to support skills and the development of skills for young people leaving schools, for those in tertiary education, those who need to retrain because of the downturn in the jobs market. There are opportunities there for apprenticeships, which have also been identified, and job creation. And stepping back from that, there was also a focus on looking at alternative ways of delivering investment and delivering improvements in nature, but also delivering improvements and identifying different models for investing in decarbonisation across Wales. So that's sort of the broad, very much a whistle-stop tour of some of the things which are set out in more detail in the report. What I'm going to focus on now are some of the areas where I think you guys may have a particular interest. So one of the, we've seen a very strong narrative emerging from Welsh Government about the role and importance of reconnecting people, refocusing on our urban areas and our urban town centres to make them more into a community, the 20-minute community, to sort of really use these as an opportunity to support the well-being and the broader economic benefits that we've seen emerge through the first lockdown. So a number of surveys at a Wales level, at a UK level, have indicated that and probably in all of our own organisations, have indicated that one of the benefits people have found through lockdown, yes, we can, we've all proven that we can work from home. We have the technology to work from home. We've all, to some extent, in the first lockdown, enjoyed the well-being benefits of not having to commute into our jobs in the centre of Cardiff or in the centre of Swansea. Or to travel, extensively to North Wales, and so there are some well-being benefits that we've all identified, and we want to lock in those benefits so that we don't all move back into a high dependency on travelling to do our day-to-day work. So Welsh Government has given the commitment to that 30% of the Welsh workforce will be, be able to work flexibly, be able to work from home, but equally has been given a very strong focus to sort of identifying hubs in our communities where people can co-locate across the public and third sector to work from those hubs. And so this whole focus on reimagining our towns, reimagining our urban areas is a real opportunity for us, a real focus for us to make sure that that investment builds in the importance of green space. So one of the really significant things that we've seen is the unequal access of some of our communities to green space. Some of the more deprived parts of Wales have limited access to parks, to routes to get out to walk along the beach, those sorts of things. But we've recognised that being outdoors and being able to connect with nature is a significant benefit to individuals' well-being and health and physical health. So when we're thinking about reimagining our urban areas and thinking about, what benefits that has for the economy and for the vibrancy of those town centres. The Green Recovery Task and Finish group have been very clear in making the statement that we need to make those space, we need to make sure that they also think about green space in that work, so that parks, that the quality of the parks improves, not just for people, but we make them a haven for nature as well. So that might mean not having pristine rows of pretty tulips and daffodils, but having wild meadows, wildflower meadows, having a different planting, which really builds the resilience and the connectedness for nature. So that's about reimagining our urban areas, and that is something, there's a lot of detail written up in the report about that. The second area which I wanted to draw out for you is the whole focus on active travel and sustainable transport. Welsh Government has made significant money available to support active travel, and we welcome that. That's seen as a really positive benefit. We feel that in creating new pathways, creating new cycleways, putting in some of that new infrastructure to sort of encourage communities to get on their bike. Needs to be accessible for all. So is done to ensure that the whole diversity of our communities can use those facilities, but also that those networks, those active travel networks, don't just focus on connecting people with school or with the middle of town or with the industrial estates. We need those networks, those pathways, to also help connect people with nature. So finding pathways, footpaths, cycleways which connect people to local nature reserves, to getting to the top of a mountain, those sorts of things is really, really important. And for all of the pathways that we put in, to really think about those as being pathways for nature, so that we make sure that the planting along those routes encourage a diversity of wildlife with a rich diversity of planting, which can encourage a range of pollinators, encourage a range of wildlife. So when we're thinking about investment in active travel, we don't just think, oh, it's a bit of a. We really maximise the opportunities around that investment. There is also a theme in the report. In Wales, Wales is one of the first countries to have invested in the Wales Coast Path. Well, in a way, a coast path which goes around all of our coastline. That really drives some significant benefits to those coastal communities, but there's a recognition in the report that there's an opportunity to do more and to drive that investment back into the hinterland, providing pathways which are accessible to the whole diversity, for a diverse range of users, and sort of a looking to the future with the electric and bike charging points along the route as well. So that's the focus on active travel and sustainable transport. And then the third focus I wanted to draw out was around housing. Now, poor housing is one of the key determinants of poor health outcomes across Wales. We've got significant opportunities to, and there's a significant commitment by Welsh Government to target investment to retrofitting social housing and to look at retrofitting within private landlords as well. This is there's already a sort of an established program from government, which we'd always say they could do more, but in pushing for that investment, we were really encouraged to see a number of proposals which focus on on building the skills and ensuring that the investment in social housing and in retrofitting doesn't go to just some of the big UK-wide construction companies, but that investment by Welsh Government stays within the local economy. So some specific proposals which have come through, which is really looking and builds across to the ideas of the foundational economy of supporting SMEs and third sector organisations to be able to respond to and engage with any future procurement exercises, so that the skills and the investment stays within the Welsh economy. And then the final area which I wanted to draw out for you relates to the National Nature Service. So the National Nature Service, it has been something which has been talked about at a UK level sort of quite a bit over the last 12 months. But at a UK level, it's sort of lost some of its momentum now. In Wales, we have seen a collaboration between Peter Davis from the WCVA and a member of the Task and Finish group, along with Sue Pritchard from the Food, Farming and Countryside Commission. They have collaborated and invested quite a lot of time working with people over in the period since September to co-design a Welsh National Nature Service, which will provide opportunities for young people, from school-age children to those leaving school, to those leaving university or leaving college, those who are temporarily out of work, to build their skills, to build their experience by being involved in work which benefits nature. So that could be work in woodlands, it could be work tree planting, it could be maintenance of woodlands, it could be food growing and community allotments, community growing. It could be sort of dealing with, as you've got there, some of the sort of issues with, I don't know, whatever they are, bracken and that sort of stuff, so dealing with invasive species, but also sort of using this very much as an opportunity to, by engaging with young people, to fire up a passion in nature and the environment, which will, and allowing them to connect with nature through being outdoors, which will provide them with something to, which will be critical, really, so important to their well-being through life. So the National Nature Service, there's been that you may see a number of Twitter feeds, tweets around this area, with a number of organisations coming together, from traditional environment organisations, third sector organisation and voluntary organisations, as well as food growers and farmers and forestry people as well. So it's a very broad church in Wales as a way of co-designing an approach which will really which will take us forward, you know, build capacity over the next couple of years. So those are the 4 areas I wanted to draw out for you. So as I've mentioned a couple of times, the report was published at the end of December. No, not the end of November, early January, December, sorry, end of November, early December. There we are. And in that report, there's a real commitment now by the Task and Finish group, because they, you know, they've really coalesced around the idea of working together, working in collaboration, and really driving delivery, and wanting to maintain that momentum by continuing to work together. So they've agreed to form a Green Recovery Delivery Partnership, with NRW hosting that delivery partnership, but it's not, you know, it's at arm's length to NRW, the corporate body. We've got a number of people, a number of organisations have committed resources. So to Cymru Welsh Water, National Trust, Future Generations Commissioner for Wales, and the Food, Farming and Countryside Commission have committed project managers to work with people who submitted proposals over the coming months. So their focus is very much, I'm not going to read the detail of this, but the really take-home message from this is that, you know, we see very much the importance of working with those people who've submitted proposals, say 168 proposals, to get to build, to understand where they are now, to understand what type of support they need, and the support that the Green Recovery Delivery Partnership will provide to them is tailored to their specific needs. But it's very much about helping them connect into a wider networks, collaborating and finding sources of funding, identifying different sources of funding and different sources of support which are already available. This is really with the primary objective of making sure we have got in Wales a really strong pipeline of projects that are ready to come on stream when the funding becomes available in the new financial year from Welsh Government, from directly from the National Lottery Heritage Fund and community funds, and NRW potentially through our grant funding schemes. So this is very much about building collaboration, helping people build strong proposals. So there's a good pipeline of projects coming through. Those projects could be, you know, testing ideas, and that is perfectly great, you know, but equally they could build into bigger collaborations across a number of sectors. What we recognise is that in the first call for ideas, there were very few community-led initiatives, and so which with a specific focus on more deprived communities. So we recognise that we're going to have to do some additional work to work with those communities, engage with those communities as we move forward over the coming months. So what next? So I've sort of touched on this already. So we are gearing up to sort of putting up another call for good ideas at the end of February. We are hosting collaboration and networking workshops. And Sir David, Henshaw and some of the panel are sort of working now to engage the community, the business community, in enabling them to engage in and work with the green recovery. So, you know, bringing in private sector finance, bringing in the business community is, we feel, the key really now to unlocking delivery over the next 12 to 18 months, as we all recognise that you know, the funding is going to be very tight as we move through the next 12 months, and, you know, outside and beyond the actual COVID response into delivery, into the recovery phase. We are likely to be facing a very difficult financial position. So finding the good, finding alternative business models, drawing in the business community into the discussion and the debate is really critical in providing a more sustainable financial footing for this work moving forward. And that is the end of my talk, Christian, if I hand across to you now.
Thank you. That's a really interesting, comprehensive presentation. Just one thing I was thinking, Sarah, actually, do you think, thinking of a lot of, you know, a lot of businesses and shops may be threatened with closure in our sort of town centres as a result of the pandemic, do you think this may accelerate the action around reimagining the urban environment? I
do indeed, yes. I really do think that whole focus of, you know, we're seeing the decline of our, you know, some shops disappearing already. And I think, you know, thinking about sort of, some of us might have got into sort of vintage and recycling and upcycling and sort of making our goods sort of have a longer life. sort of looking at opportunities for those sort of care and repair facilities within our town centres is very much, really a good opportunity there.
Thank you. Well, we've got quite a few questions coming in from our audience. So I'll start with the first question, which is from Phil Chambers. And he asked a question in relation to disabled people. And he said that an inequality impact assessment that he did for Natural Resources Wales showed that disabled people are underrepresented in outdoor recreation. So his question was, how will the socio-economic disadvantage of disabled people and their spending power be squared? And how does that relate to the green recovery?
Oh gosh, that's a really difficult question, a really hard question. Thank you very much. I think it's a good question. We haven't explicitly addressed it in this report. There are we do talk about in the active travel space and in the sort of reimagine in the tourism space, where we talk about pilgrimage trails and those sorts of things, about making sure that those are accessible to all, so that they are disabled users are able to access those facilities.
Thank you for that, Sarah. Next question we've had is from Graham Brand, and this is in relation to a World Wildlife Fund report, and which talks about proposing development and use of new funding mechanisms. And in December, Circular Economy Wales launched, I think it's Celyn, a mutual credit scheme for Wales. So he was asking, what opportunities do you think mutual credit offer for the funding in the green recovery and the development of a more circular and sustainable economy? Pretty long question.
Isn't it? Well, I think it's something, I don't have the answer to that. I think it's something that I've read the WWF report. It's got some really good, solid ideas in there, which we are really keen to explore and build on, using Sir David's network as well. So if you've got some good ideas around how we can tie that with the mutual side of things, then, let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
I don't have the answer.
Thank you, Sarah. Next question is from Laura Palmer, and she's asking about, she's recently been involved in advising on an active cycle path which was proposed through Ancient Woodland. Are Welsh Government or National Resources Wales looking at an alternative to using tarmac, to using a more sustainable material in order to protect the ancient woodland ground flora? And are they thinking, they were considering things like recycled plastic, but it's unlikely to meet active travel standards. So she just welcomed what your thoughts would be.
Right, so this isn't an NRW view here, because there will be a policy view on that. But I think if we are going to really grasp the circular economy and really drive the need to substitute different materials, and moving away from tarmac, which is a high carbon use, to a low carbon use, of course, that is the direction of travel we should be going in, as long as it doesn't compromise the ability of some members of the community to use that facility.
Great, thank you. And another question from Graham Brown. So I think you mentioned a little bit around the funding element. So in terms of those good ideas and being taken forward, how would they be developed, supported and funded? Is the question. Okay,
so the proposals which have been submitted, the project managers, so that group of Welsh Water, National Trust, that hub of people are contacting proposers, talking about to understand where their proposal is now, what type of support they need. This isn't about, we haven't got a money tree down the back of the sofa. So this is really understanding what they need to make a really strong business case, which when the funding becomes available from other sources, those projects are able to fly.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Great. And we had another question here from Alex Cameron Smith, and he wants to know, in terms of what will your community engagement look like around some of these ideas, particularly reflecting that many of our disadvantaged communities might be less or unable to access digital technologies, and just how we basically we're proposing to address that?
Yeah, we haven't got the answer to that yet. We really do need to be mindful of the ability, well, the you know, their access to digital, and so it might be that we have to build that approach carefully and choose the point and the time of engagement. So even if we release this call for good ideas in February, we will give ourselves a different. There will be future proposed calls for good ideas, which could be particularly tailored to those communities, so that the networks can go out and hold more facilitated face-to-face events rather than wholly relying on digital. And we have to recognise as well that there is the network around the PSBs, and the PSBs have a network of engagement with these communities, and so it's for us as NRW to use our seat at those PSBs to sort of facilitate some of that engagement. But we haven't worked all of that through yet, so it's working it through. Work in progress.
Yeah. Okay. Next question is from Roger. How does this work around natural resources Wales and the green recovery? How does this all fit with the current area statement priorities, and why are they not combined so we can have regional ideas or responses to the green recovery?
Well, oh gosh, so I think it's important to remember that the area statements are owned by, NRW facilitated and developed those products. We were really keen not to pigeonhole people and to gather good ideas from anybody and everybody. That was really the mantra of Sir David Henshaw, the chair. Mm-hmm. So we didn't want to just pigeonhole people through the networks of the area statements. It doesn't stop engagement. There's some engagement through area statements has happened over the last couple of months, and that could build proposals which could be submitted to the green recovery in the February call for good ideas or a future one. It doesn't, we're flexible. As you can tell, we're building this as we go along. So, yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. A few more questions. So the next question is from Rob. You reference repair spaces in urban areas. We've established the most rural makerspace in the UK. What options for collaboration are there for us and others with established provisions of this type?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. Let's have a conversation. If you pick up our email, we'll exchange emails and we'll have a proper chat about it. If that's okay.
We can send out your email afterwards. Yeah, that's no problem.
That's fine.
At all. Yeah, that's great. Next question is, does anyone, this might be one to put in the chat, but where can we find the full report from the World Wildlife Fund? So that might be something that a colleague might know in the audience that they could pop into the chat. So maybe not one for you, Sarah.
That's okay. Yeah,
that's okay. Next question is from William Mansfield. How are bodies like PSB supposed to implement these recommendations? Will there be any direct engagement with them?
Okay, so if you noticed on the Task and Finish group, there Andrew Davis from RCT and the chair of the LGA sat on the Task and Finish group, and he was supported by Tim Pepin, who's the director of the WLGA. So we had a deliberate process where local authorities submitted to Julie James, their minister, a whole raft of proposals for investment in health, social care, education, but also in areas which touched on aspects of the green recovery. So through the development, so that relates, some of that was around active travel and sort of housing. So through the work, we sort of made sure that those synergies and connections were made, and we are continuing to do that now as we work through to make sure that opportunities for investment, we can either that some of that can be channeled through a local authority route as well. So that's sort of deals with the local authority aspect. And I think, you know, as NRW now, we are, as one of the only organisation who sits on all PSBs, we are developing our evidence and our input into the conversations around their contribution to the green recovery, and we're making sure that that information is sort of is coming through. But I think it's really important to remember is that the 168 good ideas are need to be adapted, need to be tailored to the needs of your specific community and your specific places. They are not a carte blanche of, you know, everything everywhere, because it won't suit your communities or the needs that you have in those communities. Some of the ideas, you know, the broad headings, the broad priorities can be are relevant, but you need to tailor them to the needs of your specific communities.
Thank you. And another question from me actually is in terms of these ideas, as these progress, is there a program around evaluating some of these ideas? How will they be evaluated, and whether some of them actually are things that we can scale across other communities across Wales?
So we have I suppose we're in a process, but it's very much co-design. So this isn't a traditional defining the monitoring and evaluation right at the outset. So we're growing this and adjusting and adapting as we go through. The chair is very clear, David is very clear that, you know, we need to innovate, we need to encourage innovation, we need to cross-fertilize different people, different sectors to join things together in different ways. Some of that will work, and that's great. Some of that will fail, which is also great. And this is really important for us to recognize that learning, capturing that learning, so that we can draw the lessons from it and apply it elsewhere is really important. So I would say innovating, adapting, and sort of reflecting on things as you move forward is really important. And equally important is not to, you know, a commitment, and what's the way you'd expect the people on the group to say this, given we've got Sophie there, but really, you know, that we properly engage with people, we properly involve people in the decision making, so that we, you know, that the proposals come through, people don't reject them as we move through, as you get into implementation phases, that sort of coalescence around the ideas builds momentum and takes things forward.
Thank you. That's a really good comprehensive answer. I don't think we've got any more questions. So I don't know if you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the attendees.
Oh, well,
it's a big topic area, and it's really interesting work. Yeah.
I guess for me, given the cross section of people who are here today, it's, you know, what we are still in the pandemic. We are still in dealing, you know, we're dealing with in the response phase. We need to, we really need, you know, as we move forward now, to engage with the health professions in you know, the different health professions, to draw your voice into this debate. We've not drawn you explicitly into the debate so far because you've all had your head full of other stuff. But there will come a point where we need to draw you into the discussion, into the debate, and make sure that we are, you know, your learning, your insight into what's going on in communities and what would have the greatest impact from your perspective is built into the work that's going forward. There is a very strong focus on health, connecting people with nature because of the health and well-being benefits. The mental health benefits, which we've seen, you know, and this is perhaps more anecdotal evidence than really hard evidence at the moment, but also the physical activity evidence. And I think that's becoming a bit more defined, I think. But, you know, to draw you into that conversation as we move forward, I think is a real opportunity, not just, you know, with the Green Recovery Task and Finish group, but, you know, with the network of people in developing proposals that you can engage in that conversation as it moves forward.
Thank you. We have actually had another question, so
right.
Just one more. So we have a question about the circular economy. Seems like a large focus as part of the green recovery, and how does a body like National Resources Wales support this?
Circular economy, oh gosh. Well, today you'll have seen on the BBC Wales website, NRW is publishing the Sonar 2 report. Sonar 2 is our statutory responsibility to set out our assessment of the sustainable management of natural resources across Wales. The findings from that report are pretty stark. Poor resource use, poor resilience across Wales, really, for our natural resources and for the environment. But the report identifies some real opportunities, and those opportunities are in the space of the circular economy, are in the space of nature-based solutions, are in the space of looking at food, transport and energy, to have a real focus on driving those sectors to improve and focus on the circular economy so that we can realise the benefits for the wider society and for nature.
Okay.
So I'd encourage you all to read that report because it's really good. Okay.
Great. And I'm going to take one final question we've had now. So will the next call for action welcome proposals focusing on the One Health approach? In fact, I've just lost the rest of the question, but yeah.
Yep. No. Of course we would. I think that's a really powerful approach for linking food, growing food, the animals, and ecosystems. So no, I think if there's proposals in that space, we would welcome them, of course.
Great. And you did say, because we had a question earlier, just when the next call for the second set of proposals is that in the
that will be the end of February. End of February we'll put that out. Okay. But we can I can provide you guys with the details and you can put it through the network, that's fine.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, well, thank you for answering all those questions, Sarah. Really comprehensive answers and really interesting presentation. Very obviously, green recovery really important to public health and to reducing health inequalities as well. So thank you everyone who's joined the webinar today, and we would ask if you could complete a short evaluation questionnaire. We will send you a link of this. And if you're not a member of the Public Health Network Cymru, we would encourage you to join, and we will be holding more webinars. We hold these every month. So finally, if you have any future ideas for webinars, we would really like to hear from you. And yeah, just let us know any topics, but a really good and comprehensive presentation from Sarah today. And if you've got any further questions, let us know afterwards and we'll pick those up. And yeah, diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye.